Welcome to this edition of Take Notice. I'm your host, Janet Yee. San Mateo County is uniquely and beautifully positioned between the Pacific Ocean and the San Francisco Bay. This enormous amount of shoreline puts us pretty much at ground zero for sea level rising. And that puts another huge responsibility on San Mateo County's Department of Public Works, of which Jim Porter is the director. Jim, let's back up first of all, and can you tell me overall what your department is responsible for?
Thank you. Yes, the Department of Public Works is responsible for several functional areas in San Mateo County, and we do that through 4 divisions. We're responsible for the county's roads, and that's in the unincorporated area. There's about 316 miles of roads. We maintain those roads as well as the drainage systems associated with them. That section also handles vehicle maintenance for the entire county. We manage all the equipment that the county owns. We also have an engineering division. That's where our civil engineers are stationed. They design bridges, roads, retaining walls, about anything that involves horizontal construction. Within that group, as well as our utility section, we manage 10 sewer districts, 2 water districts, 6 stormwater districts, 11 lighting districts, 2 water districts, if I haven't mentioned those. Within that group, we also have a lot of biologists, because as you can imagine, when we're working in the environment, we will impact the flora and fauna of the county. So we make sure through our biologists that our impacts are minimized, and whatever impacts occur that we mitigate for. Then we have a facilities division. We maintain about 3.2 million square feet of county office space, including the jails, airports, and hospitals and clinics. So our department takes care of all of those buildings, including the major mechanical systems and all of the what we call tenant improvements inside. And then finally, we have administration and airports. That group manages our 2 county airports, which is San Carlos Airport and Half Moon Bay Airport, as well as processes all of our contracting invoices. As you can imagine, we do a lot of construction, and construction is expensive. And that group makes sure that all of the payments comply with the contracts, and that the tax dollars of the residents of San Mateo County are being spent not only appropriately, but legally in accordance with those contracts.
This is, I think the word enormous really applies here for your department. Now, as I understand it, you guys are also responsible for maintaining the drainage on both the bay side and the coast side. How did we fare overall in the storms of the last couple of months?
Well, we did surprisingly well this winter. It's been raining for several months, and what happens when it rains is the hillsides get loaded up with water, and that water is extra weight, and the hills begin to move. We've seen some sliding. We had a slip out on Old La Honda Road, which is temporarily closed in the location where it slipped. We saw some cracking in the hillside above Kenyatta Road last week, and we've had a lot of trees down. But by and large, we haven't had the type of experience we had 2 years ago during the winter of 2017, where we had some catastrophic failures throughout the county. So this winter's actually been a relatively low damage winter for us.
Oh, thank God for that. You guys have your hands full already. Now, I also understand that you guys do huge projects, notably the Crystal Springs Bridge. That 8-year project also involved, though, multiple jurisdictions. You had to comply and deal with other agencies in other cities. Why was that necessary when that bridge is in San Mateo County?
So the bridge that we replaced is on top of a dam, the Crystal Springs Dam. That structure is actually regulated by the state of California. So the Division of Dam Safety got involved in that project. Also above that dam was a 230 kilovolt PG&E power line that feeds roughly half of San Francisco. That line was taken out from overhead and actually placed on the side of the bridge. So that involved PG&E and federal regulators around energy. Then, obviously, the SFPUC, the San Francisco Public Utility Commission, owns the dam and the site we were working on. So we needed to coordinate with SFPUC on that project. And then, since we were working in sensitive habitat, we had to comply with the larger environmental permitting and regulatory agencies. And those generally are U.S. Fish and Wildlife, State Fish and Wildlife, the State Regional Water Quality Control Board, the Department of Water Resources at the state level, as well as NIMS, which is the National Marine Fisheries. There was one other agency, which I can't remember, but there's roughly 7 permitting agencies that you deal with. And that project was tricky because it was really 3 or 4 projects in one. The first project was to take the bridge down that was there on top of the dam. That bridge was built in about 1959, and it was clearly at the end of its useful life. The next step was the San Francisco Public Utility Commission's role. They actually built a parapet wall, or an inboard wall, that will allow them to raise the level of Crystal Springs Reservoir by 7 feet. They also widened their spillway on their dam to comply with current state regulations for having adequate capacity during maximum probable storms to release that water. So they went in and did their work. Then we came back and we put a bridge on top of all that, which was a whole different project, working with SFPUC in that sensitive area. And then finally, PG&E came back and strung their 230 kV line on our bridge. So it was several projects. And just to make it a little more fun, when we got out there and began demolition on the former bridge, we found an endangered species had been living on the dam. Those were California red-legged frogs. So as part of the environmental mitigation for that project, we had to physically move 50% of that population into the SFPUC watershed and essentially monitor those frogs to make sure that they survived the transfer process, as well as that they began flourishing in their environment in the watershed. So when you add up all those things that we had to do, it took a long time. It took longer than we would have liked, but at the end of the day, I think we got a pretty good product.
I would say so, absolutely. But now, listen, this multi-jurisdiction coordination is what's really needed, and you guys have good experience with this going forward. I understand you guys are taking the lead in the sea level rising in forming the first ever regional approach to dealing with the climate change.
Yes, we are. There's a little bit of a story on that. Supervisor Dave Pine, who was on our Board of Supervisors several years ago, about 3 years ago, really took a look at how this county was dealing with the full portfolio of water. So potable water, storm water, as well as the impacts of sea level rise. And Supervisor Pine was able to secure about $6 million, which ended up in my department, to create a flood resiliency program. And we used those dollars to start attacking problems that really weren't being addressed in this region. There are several creeks that are right on jurisdictional boundaries, because that's the way this county really developed. The creek was the border between, name your city. But really, nobody had responsibility for those. So we started looking at those projects, and we began actually doing design on fixes to the flooding problems. So for instance, Bayfront Canal in Redwood City. It's a channel that runs out by Marsh Road. When it rains, you will see that there are mobile home parks that get flooded regularly. That's as a result of the Bayfront Canal. So we're attacking that project. Belmont Creek between Belmont and San Carlos is another area that floods. We're working on that. And then there's another area up in South City called Navigable Slough, which is tidally influenced. And when the tide comes up, you have a potential for that water spilling into private property. So we started to attack those projects. And then if you fast forward to today, we started taking a look at sea level rise and the fact that we've got 20 cities in this county, many of which are on the bay side and the coast side, that really are not coordinating efforts on how to address sea level rise. Through Supervisor Pine's leadership, we began looking at forming a new agency to address that. And the way we're doing that is we're taking our current flood control district and basically repurposing it to include sea level rise and coastal erosion as part of its charges. So we're right now beginning to form that agency. We are creating this district through special legislation of the state of California. We have a bill that's being carried by Assemblyman Mullen, it's AB 825, which will form this district. We're hoping to have this formed by January 1st, and we'll begin tackling this issue. One of the big things to think about with sea level rise is it's like a slow-moving train wreck. You know it's coming, it's not right here today, but it's going to be here in 30 or 40 years. And these sea level rise projects, these big levee projects, or however you choose to protect your shoreline, are complicated multi-jurisdictional projects that cost tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars to construct. So you really need to start planning for that now, because if you wait 30 years until you see major impacts, it's too late. You got to do it now. So this county is literally on the bleeding edge of sea level rise. I'm involved in the state organization, the County Engineers Association of California. And I can tell you within the state, we're starting to see impacts of sea level rise, but I've not seen a region that has taken such a proactive approach as San Mateo County. So we're proud to be a part of this unfortunate circumstance that we're all in protecting ourselves from sea level rise. But I have full confidence that we're taking the right approach and that we will be protected into the future.
I completely commend this proactive approach. It needs to be done now, and you guys certainly sound like you're on top of it. But we in San Mateo County have an awful lot at stake. Not only do we have these low-lying cities, San Bruno, Foster City, Redwood City, and the like, we've got huge corporations, Facebook, Oracle, Genentech. Overall, how much are these places and corporations really in harm's way?
So I would say most of them. If you think about Facebook, Oracle, there are several companies, Electronic Arts, that are right by the shoreline. And to their credit, we've reached out to a lot of these corporations. They understand the issue of sea level rise. They're more than willing to partner with us. And they will be an active partner as we move forward. So they really are involved in this process. And in fact, when we start talking about how to protect communities, this really will be a community process when we look at different shorelines in different communities. And there are corporations on those shorelines. So we want to make sure that as we develop protection for our communities, that the communities weigh in and tell us what is the best form of protection for them and what amenities might they want with it. For instance, you're on the coast side, it would make sense to put bike and pedestrian trails along there and really open up the bay in areas where you don't necessarily have access, because there's a lot of private land along the bay that the public just can't get to. When we start developing these protections, that will open up public access to a lot of the areas that you're not seeing right now.
So through this unimaginable situation that we're facing, we could actually empower ourselves to have a much better future.
I believe we can. And if we plan properly and plan now, it opens us up to a way to not only protect ourselves, but to enhance the great natural environment that we have right now. And there's one thing I'd like to add about this. San Mateo County is pretty unique in California. We've got 20 cities and the county. The only other county that has anything like this is LA County. They've got 88 cities. And LA, my friends in LA County say they're as big as the state of Ohio. Well, when we have 20 cities, we need to make sure that we speak as one voice. So right now, if you look to the south of us, the Santa Clara Valley Water District is that voice for Santa Clara County. In San Francisco, they have the San Francisco PUC. Both of these organizations are very active in Washington and Sacramento. They shape legislation, and they become recipients of grant funding, because you've got to be in Washington to not only be known, but to know where those grant funds are and to know what projects are going to fit well for those grant funds. Forming this agency provides San Mateo County that option that we don't have right now. Right now, with 20 cities, you could have Redwood City going to Sacramento or Washington to try to get a grant, and they might be competing with Millbrae. We don't want that. We want to speak as one county, so that we know what our priorities are for grant funding, and we can go up and speak as one county up in Washington and hopefully become more favorable in terms of receipt of grant funding.
Jim, I think people have gotten an awful lot more information about what you folks do at the Department of Public Works for the county. I don't think anybody had any idea that you operate ground operations for the airports, 10 sewer districts. Most people think of the Department of Public Works in terms of road conditions, potholes, and then it goes to the idea of gas tax, and the conversation goes on and on. What's going on with that, the gas tax?
So gas tax is the primary and generally the only funding source for roadway repair. I get a lot of phone calls from folks that say, I pay my property taxes, why isn't my road fixed? And my response is, we appreciate the property taxes, but that doesn't go into your roads. Your roads are paid for through these gas taxes. Now, as we evolve as a society, we're seeing a lot more electric vehicles for good reason. Internal combustion engines are one of the problems that are causing global warming. Problem is, electric cars don't use gas, so they're not paying into the gas tax, so essentially they're not contributing to maintaining the road system. So as you see vehicles become more efficient, they're getting more mileage per gallon, they're using less gas, there's less money to put in the road system. So we try to maximize the amount of dollars that we have, maximize the use of those dollars in paving through what we have, what's called a pavement management system. So we survey all the roads in the county on a 3-year basis, and we prioritize which roads to fix first. But the gas tax has been notoriously underfunded in California. It seems like we're paying a lot at the pump, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But those dollars are the primary repair dollars for your roadways. So it's vitally important that we spend those dollars properly, and that as we look into the future, clearly a gas tax on fuel, on gasoline, is not going to be a model that we use into the future. Oregon is looking at vehicle miles traveled as a way of collecting revenue to fund their transportation system. But our job really is to take those dollars that we get for gas tax and spend them judiciously and wisely so that we keep the majority of the system in good condition. And that's really what we're trying to do.
So in order to continue all of this ongoing maintenance, you have to continue to change your mode of operation and how you get your funding.
That is correct.
Thank you so much for all of your information and all of the work that you and your department does.
Well, thank you.
The San Mateo County Department of Public Works has about $245 million in annual funding. Now that comes from sources outside the general fund, but make no mistake, whether it's state, federal, or local, that budget is your tax dollars, and it's being spent very wisely. I'm Janet Yee for Take Notice. Have a safe day.